This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Rachel Mullins, host of #NoFilterFriday here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my new show, #NoFilterFriday, where we talk about all of the sexual misconduct allegations swirling around Hollywood. A new show drops every Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of #NoFilterFriday. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
The latest headlines.
If they go out and wipe the floor with the Texans, I might buy in.
The insightful interviews.
Whitney McIntosh, SB Nation.
I was more impressed with John Carlo, especially when you consider Aaron Judge's all-star squad.
The hottest takes.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley had a great game against Iowa, but he hasn't done much.
Can all be found on Press Row. Here's your host.
It's clearly time for a change. It's only a matter of time before it happens.
Christian Heimel.
Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome on Press Row, the first show of the 2018 calendar year here, and we've got a big one planned for you. A lot going on in the world of sports, and of course, we are here to cover it with the experts, analysts, and reporters who cover it all. No nonsense in 2018, as we were in the last half of 2018 as well. I am Christian Heimel. You can find the show on social media, Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. Find us on Facebook as well, Press Row Podcast - Public House Media. If you want to find me on Twitter, I love connecting with you guys. You can do that at Chris Heimel. Look forward to speaking with you guys throughout the year, talking anything from college football, college basketball, to the NHL, MLB, Olympics coming up in just about a month. We can't wait for all of that as well. But some big stuff to start off 2018. This is why I love New Year's, is because you get college football right there, smack in your face, the epitome of it, right at the same time that the NFL playoffs begin, right when the trade deadline in the NHL and NBA are heating up and things are starting to get really moving with those two teams, or those two leagues, as we hit the second half of their season. And then Major League Baseball pitchers and catchers report in just under 6 weeks. Who can't be excited for all of that? The start of the year, I know a lot of people don't like the cold, and I hate it. I mean, we record this show in Davenport, Iowa, where we hit a record low of negative 19 the other day. But I tell you what, whether you like the cold or not, I personally prefer the summertime. The first 3 months of the year are a lot of fun. When you talk about playoffs, you talk about championships being decided, you talk about playoff races in the NBA and the NHL. Every 4 years, you get the Winter Olympics, which is just another fun thing to talk about. And then, of course, baseball starting anew in mid-February. And then for those of you who like NASCAR, you had the Daytona 500 in a month and a half. You got to be excited about what's happening here. The NFL draft is coming up in a couple of months, so a lot of fun stuff to be excited about, a lot of great stuff to be excited about. And we've got two great guests here today. I can't wait for you guys to hear from them. Zach Barnett, College Football Talk, and thefootballscoop.com. He's going to join us and help us preview Alabama, Georgia, the All-SEC Championship for college football's national trophy after two really exciting games. And the Sugar Bowl maybe not as much, obviously with Bama winning by the margin that they did and dominating the way that they did, but you saw a number of things, and we're going to ask Zach Barnett about this. Did Alabama's defense legitimize the committee's selection to put them in at number 4 and give them that opportunity? Did Baker Mayfield and Lincoln Riley, did they ruin an opportunity? Did they have a golden chance to make it Oklahoma, Bama in the national championship? Or is Georgia, with a true freshman quarterback, a 19-year-old in Jake Fromm, and the tremendous duo of Chubb and Michelle in the backfield, are they just that talented? We'll talk with him a little bit, of course. The news coming out of Arizona this week, Rich Rodriguez fired among sexual harassment allegations. He has since denied them. If you really read into it, it's kind of interesting and very strange to see how it all happened. But a lot to talk about with Zach Barnett. We're going to speak with him in just a little bit. And then we've also got Eric Galko of Optimum Scouting as well as the Sporting News. He is going to help us preview the NFL playoffs coming up. The Pro Football Hall of Fame finalists were announced on Wednesday. Talk about some of the coaching vacancies here in the NFL. John Gruden, is he actually going to Oakland, and what does it all entail? You heard him mention earlier in the week that he's very interested. He's excited. He's at a point in his life where he wants to come back and coach, and that ownership is not part of the deal with Oakland. And then the bigger question I have is, how did Marvin Lewis go from just a month ago leaving the Cincinnati Bengals under his own terms to signing a 2-year deal to stay with Cincinnati? So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about, obviously, the playoffs, and then we'll talk with him about a way too early NFL draft preview. Who goes number 1? Is this quarterback class the best we've seen in the last 20 years? Saquon Barkley, what is his draft stock like? And everything else that we could possibly get into just a little bit too early to talk about. So we got that coming up. Of course, your questions as well, your listener questions, I should say. You can always submit those in social media. Again, Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM, on Facebook at PressRowPodcast-Public House Media. And then you can always email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. But I want to touch on some big subjects that maybe you haven't really talked about or haven't heard much about over the last couple of days. College basketball is really kicking into high gear. You got conference plays starting up, which is a lot of fun. You're going to really start to see the cream rise to the top, and you're seeing what is some interesting stuff. And I tell you what, I absolutely love the fact that, and everybody talks about it, oh, the SEC in football was a down year. Well, they've got both teams in the national championship. Tell you what, the SEC is not in a down year. That is in college basketball. The SEC in college basketball right now is tremendous. And if you're not watching, you really need to. Because look at the SEC here as you go through their standings and you go through national rankings in the SEC. You look at Kentucky, obviously a perennial contender, ranked this week 17th in the country. But then you look at Florida. Florida's doing incredibly well. Auburn with a big win earlier against a ranked Tennessee squad. Tennessee, a team that at the start of the year was incredible. They were knocking off teams, had big wins over Purdue and a couple of others in those early season tournaments. 0-2 to start conference play. That's rough for them. South Carolina coming off their first Final Four appearance in program history. They're there. Alabama is doing very well. It's a lot of fun to watch the SEC in college basketball. As you look through the AP Top 25 in the SEC, you've got, let's see here, you've got Kentucky obviously ranked, you've got Tennessee ranked, Arkansas is ranked, and then you've got teams receiving votes like a Alabama, like a Auburn. Those teams are really starting. The SEC is a lot of fun. I know the Big 12 is great. I know the Big 10 is very good. The ACC obviously is the cream of the crop when you look at it with teams like Duke and West Virginia and all these, and Virginia and North Carolina, obviously so great there. But the SEC is a lot of fun when it comes to college basketball right now, and watching them is a lot of fun. And you're going to see some big SEC matchups coming up this weekend more than anything else. It's a lot exciting to watch. I love it. I love college basketball. I love this time of year. And you look at some of these games in the SEC coming up here this weekend. Arkansas, Auburn, if they can knock them off. Texas A&M is going to host LSU. Tennessee, Kentucky on Saturday is going to be sneaky good at 8 o'clock 9 o'clock Eastern time. That's going to be a fun game to watch this weekend. So the SEC, it's not just football. They're starting to really come around as a power in college basketball as well. And you have to give a lot of credit to the coaches and to the athletic directors for really going out there and trying to put together some tremendous teams. You can remember, of course, in the early 2000s when Billy Donovan took Florida to back-to-back national championships and Joakim Noah. You've got 4 or 5 teams right there ranked in the top 25. Texas A&M being one of them at number 11. It's impressive. So I love watching the SEC. Obviously, the ACC is the cream of the crop. And, of course, you've got Duke right up there as a national contender. It's going to be fun to watch teams like North Carolina and Florida State. Miami still ranked. Virginia with that great defense. Clemson is right there as well. So there's a lot of fun to watch in college basketball right now. And you're seeing some really talented teams, really talented players. Obviously, Michigan State, the number one team, Duke, Villanova, Arizona State. And then you look at some of these other things and unfortunate incidences that have happened in college basketball. But you've got Bonzi Colson expected to be a great, potentially even a number one draft pick this year. Foot fracture, is going to miss 2 months. Was leading the ACC was leading the ACC in blocks, in steals, in rebounds, and was the leading scorer for Notre Dame. A very good player, a talented player, a guy who, again, was very high up on a lot of rankings for a lot of people from when it comes to draft status. But Notre Dame now a squad that's going to severely struggle without their best player. And when you look at some of the injuries that you've had happen in college basketball, obviously Michael Porter Jr. at Missouri, he has said he's not really going to rush back from surgery and to try to play again this year. But Michael Porter Jr. was a freshman All-American, potentially number one draft pick. So who knows? But this is where college basketball really gets fun, because you get these rivalry games. You get these conference games that are just absolutely stellar. Upsets start to happen. And it's a lot of fun. We're going to dive into college basketball as we get a little bit deeper into the season, and probably starting next week, we'll touch on a little bit more with it. But not only this week with the SEC and how they've kind of come about, of course, with the Auburn victory over Tennessee, but I don't know if you guys saw this on Tuesday night, Kansas losing big at home. They've now lost 3 home games with the loss to Texas Tech. And this was a team that, when you look at Kansas, and again, we mentioned Texas Tech, a team out of the Big 12 that is not one of those highly rated ones, but they've been very good here these last couple of years and now ranked in the top 20, beating Kansas on the road. Bill Self has been tremendous at home. I think he's something like 3 losses in the prior 9 years at Kansas before this season, and it's insane. But they're 11-3 now, 1-1 in the Big 12. Is Kansas still a championship contender? But it's strange. So they're not exactly right up there at the top like they've always been, but it's something else to watch here. And I absolutely love this in college basketball. It is a lot of fun to watch, and you get some great players. You get to see the future of college basketball, and couldn't be happier to watch it. And then, of course, you get some of these interesting things like, I don't know if you guys saw Kevin Stallings at Pitt mocking Louisville, and basically saying to one of the fans, at least we didn't pay our players $100,000. So it's not going to go away. Obviously, the scandal that started out the season, but fortunately, we've gotten back to basketball now, and you're seeing some great basketball. So I hope you guys are watching it and enjoying college basketball at any level. The SEC, the Big 12, the ACC, the Big East, the Big 10, the Pac-12, or maybe even smaller conferences like the CAA or the MAC or the Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference. A lot of fun going on in college basketball. So we look forward to talking more about that as well. And then, of course, in the NBA, one of the biggest stories coming out this week was Isaiah Thomas making his return. Didn't play last night against the Celtics when they returned to the Garden, but was great to see him get back, and in 19 minutes, 17 points, couple of assists, looked great, looked healthy more than anything else, and so it was great to see that happen more than anything else, to see Isaiah Thomas after the hip surgery get back there. Greg Popovich making number 5 all-time in terms of wins, continuing to cement his legacy as one of the greatest coaches of all time. James Harden going down with an injury. How will that affect the Rockets? He'll be out for a couple of weeks. We'll find out a little bit more as well. And injuries have gone throughout basketball. It's been very, very strange. Obviously, you saw Gordon Hayward. You've seen James Harden, Steph Curry go down. Ball has gone down. Robin Lopez has gone down. A number of others have actually gotten hurt, and so it's unfortunate to see that. Ron Baker for the Knicks with an orbital fracture earlier this week. So a lot of injuries in the NBA, much like we saw in the NFL. It's unfortunate to see that, but you got to love where we are right now in terms of sports and the setting and the timing of everything, because, as mentioned, playoffs for the NFL, championship for college football, college basketball, the NBA, the NHL are all hitting the second half of the season. It's where things really start to pick up, and it's an exciting time. And I hope you guys are enjoying it because Lord knows I am. It's a lot of fun to watch. And if you had a chance to watch that Celtics-Cavs game last night, a lot of fun to see as well. It seems as though as if the Celtics are starting to turn it around, but the Cavaliers are definitely continuing to be one of the favorites, obviously, in the Eastern Conference. And then in the West, it's Golden State and Houston right now. But don't sleep on San Antonio. I love what the Timberwolves are doing. It looks like Oklahoma City might be turning it around a little bit, but we'll wait and find out as the season progresses, obviously. So it's a lot of fun. It's good to see this. It's unfortunate to see some of the injuries and some of the off-the-court issues that we've seen, both at the collegiate and the pro level. But all you know is that it is a lot of fun to watch this and to see these impressive athletes really do what they do and see some of the greatness that you've seen. One of which you probably really didn't expect at all. Kyle Kuzma, the rookie for Los Angeles. Obviously, everyone's talking about Lonzo Ball, but Kyle Kuzma has been absolutely stellar for this Lakers squad, and it's been a lot of fun to watch him here this year. Maybe even as one of the top rookies of the season. Obviously, you got Jordan Bell, the kid out of Oregon, who a lot of people were a little hesitant to take after he got injured in the NCAA tournament. But he's been tremendous. Bell's a 30th overall pick, second rounder. Same with Kuzma. Kuzma late first round. But these guys have been a lot of fun to watch. You got young talent all across the NBA, and it's one of the reasons why I like watching college basketball is because you see the future of the NBA, and if you watch it, you knew Jordan Bell was going to be a great defensive player. You knew Kyle Kuzma had the ability to be a great shooter, but what was going to happen? And then, obviously, to see him do it is a lot of fun and really great for him, despite the Lakers having an abysmal season once again. So we'll see how it all happens, but it's a great time to be a fan of basketball, college or pro. It's a great time to be a fan of sports, as championships are going to be decided here. One in just a couple of days, another in a couple of weeks. Eric Galko of Optimum Scouting, as well as the Sporting News, in just a little bit, talking the NFL playoffs. But when we return, Zach Barnett, footballscoop.com and College Football Talk will join us. We'll preview Bama and Georgia in the All-SEC National Championship, as well as recap some of the biggest stories in college football. Roll Tide or Go Dogs? We'll find out here in just a couple of days, but you're going to get a real in-depth preview next on Press Row.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Times are changing. Do you believe that you can walk on water? Do you believe that you can win this fight tonight?
Championship weekend in college football as Alabama and Georgia, two SEC schools, will meet in the national championship game Monday night in Atlanta. Zach Barnett, college football writer at Football Scoop, as well as College Football Talk, joins us now. And Zach, before we get to the actual game, news breaking earlier this week, Rich Rodriguez let go from Arizona as their head football coach due to sexual harassment allegations. What can you tell us is the latest out of Tucson?
Well, it's a weird deal where it's his secretary coming forward claiming kind of an odd sexual harassment situation where Rich she doesn't accuse Rich of touching her, but she accuses Rich of coming on to her, of not halting his players or his assistants making advancements toward her, and then also in compelling her to help him hide his affair on his wife, which is something that Rich has admitted to having the affair. So Arizona conducted an investigation that cleared him of wrongdoing. but the administrative assistant is threatening a lawsuit, and I believe has filed a lawsuit. And then at the back of all this is that Rich and the AD Dave Hinkie do not get along, and Arizona went 7-6 this season. Got real hot in the middle of the season thanks to Khalil Tate, but kind of faded down the stretch. So I think this is just kind of a convenient excuse to move on from him. And the key thing to remember is even though they're citing the sexual harassment stuff, they're firing him without cause. So they're going to pay him to go away. So if they were going to try to fire him with cause, then they could get out from under his contract paying him nothing. But that would entail a long, expensive legal battle that Arizona clearly doesn't think it could win. So they're going to pay him the $6.3 million to go away and then bring in someone new.
And now with Rich being let go, this makes 5 or 6 now changes at the head coaching position in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting that you had Jim Mora, Todd Graham, and Rich Rod arrive at UCLA, Arizona, and Arizona State at the same time, and then now all 3 of those schools are making changes. You had Mike Leach, a coach who if you'd asked me a month ago, I would say that won't be at Washington State, is still at Washington State. You had Mario Cristobal, who a year and a half ago I would say would never be a head coach at Oregon. He's a Florida Southeast guy is a head coach at Oregon. You had the flop in the bowl season. They were left out of the college football playoff. So it's a time of turmoil and transition out west right now.
He's Zach Barnett, college football writer at Football Scoop and College Football Talk. More true statement out of the New Year's 6 games. Alabama's defense legitimized the committee putting them in the college football playoff, or UCF legitimized the argument to expand the playoffs?
I would say the Alabama one. I mean, UCF is the first team of the playoff era to go undefeated, Group of 5 or Power 5, but they're not the first Group of 5 to win a game like this. Houston, famously beat Florida State in 2015. Their case is probably as good as anybody's, considering, they beat Auburn, who beat Alabama and Georgia. But, I don't believe UCF belonged in the Final Four. I mean, their schedule, the AAC was not, that great this year, especially their division, the AAC East. And, the playoff's not going to expand, and any talk of expansion is just a waste of time.
Well, it's not going to stop the Knights from celebrating as they have claimed the national championship, going to hold a parade for their undefeated season. What's the future like for UCF with Scott Frost now officially becoming the head coach at Nebraska?
I think it's going to depend on Josh Heupel's coaching acumen. I think Scott Frost is going to prove to be a special head coach. The success he had at Oregon, and then obviously the miracle turnaround he had at UCF. I don't know that Josh Heupel's on that level. But then again, I don't know that a lot of people are on that level. He's kind of an unknown as a head coach, obviously. Never had that job before. It was impressive. He was, obviously at Oklahoma for a few years, his alma mater, then gets let go, then kind of reinvents himself at Utah State, then did a really good job as the offensive coordinator at Missouri. So it'll be, I think UCF, on its face, is the best job in the Group of 5. The talent around there is ridiculous. You've got a kind of a pro city without a pro football team, which I think, separates itself from a USF or a Houston, or even an SMU. And I think, if Josh Heupel isn't super successful at UCF, then the next coach will. I think that's just a great job.
Zach Barnett, College Football Talk and Football Scoop joining us here on Press Row. Biggest story out of the bowl season that's not associated with the 4 teams in the college football playoff?
Let's see. I think you have to go UCF if that's allowed. The way that game was an incredible game, and then Scott Frost, is staying on to coach the game, and just the relationship that UCF and Nebraska had, throughout this last month has been something that you just don't ever see in college football. I mean, you had Nebraska reporters basically became UCF reporters for this month because Nebraska didn't have a team in a bowl game. That's just something that you don't see quite often. So I'm gonna go with that one, even if it may be cheating a little bit.
So now as we look ahead to Monday night, I think when you talk Georgia, to me the biggest surprise is Jake Fromm, a true freshman, 19 years old, being able to lead this team to within a win of the national championship. What's been most impressive about him this year?
I think everything he does, I mean, he's obviously great throwing the ball, but everything he does outside of that, I think, is what separates him from Jacob Eason. I think he's just got kind of a magnetism around him, a charisma that the offense and the team flock to it, and they clearly believe in him. And then I think he grasps Jim Chaney's offense at a level that Eason didn't. Checking, from one run play to another run play that turns into a big touchdown is the type of stuff that you usually see seniors do, and he's doing it as a true freshman. So, if you just look at the kid's history and his makeup, it's not surprising to me that he's having this success this early.
The Rose Bowl game, obviously one for the ages, highest scoring game and the first overtime game in its 104-year history. Baker Mayfield, the Heisman Trophy winner. Lincoln Riley, despite being there for a few years, his first year as a head coach. Heartbreaking way to lose, but should this take away at all from the season that the Sooners had as a team and then Baker individually?
I have a lot of friends that are Oklahoma fans, Oklahoma graduates, and they are completely crushed by this loss. I think they thought that this was their year. Obviously Baker, this was his final season. He's a guy that doesn't come along, every year. The way they lost the game is the most painful way you can lose the game as a fan. I mean, I think if you told, even beyond having a 17-point lead just before halftime, I think you told, Oklahoma fans that they'd have a chance with the ball in Baker's hands, with a chance to win the game, they would take it. And then Oklahoma had three chances, up 45-38 with the ball, 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and Oklahoma just runs the ball 3 times, kills 2 minutes, but then gives Georgia the ball right back. And, we all knew Georgia was going to go down and score there. And then it's 45-45. You still got a chance to get into a field goal. You've got a good field goal kicker. You've got plenty of time. And then they only throw the ball once on a 3rd and 2, wheel route to the running back. And then you get in overtime. And it's you're down 48-45. Your defense has risen up and forced Georgia into a field goal, and it's 4th and 1, and you don't go for it. And you don't throw the ball once there. I think that was I think if Lincoln Riley could play that over again, I definitely think he would. I questioned that at the time, and I think Oklahoma fans are going to be questioning that for years and years.
So Georgia will meet their SEC foe, Alabama. Nick Saban, their head coach, saying after the game in the Sugar Bowl that he wishes there was an extra day of travel because they couldn't leave New Orleans till the day after. Your thoughts on what Coach Saban had to say, but then also how Alabama's defense kind of rose up and became Alabama again in that victory over Clemson.
I think Nick needs to get over it. I mean, you have one less day, but you're going from New Orleans to Birmingham, or New Orleans to Tuscaloosa. Georgia can say they have to fly cross country and back. I mean, not everything in life is going to be exactly equal, and coaches, especially Nick, have a hard time of handling it. And you tell your players to respond to change. You just get over it, Nick. As far as their defense goes, I was, frankly, I was surprised at how average they made Kelly Bryant look, and it the last time we saw them, they lost, obviously, to Auburn on the road. Having not seen them for a month, you just kind of forget just the waves and waves of just defensive studs that they throw at you. And if you're, no one obviously outside of Auburn in a juiced up home game has been able to handle it.
Speaking with Zach Barnett, college football writer at Football Scoop and College Football Talk, the injury to Anthony Jennings doesn't help this Alabama defense, and especially with that talented tandem in the backfield of Chubb and Michelle. Where do you see kind of the edge, Alabama's defense or the Dogs' running attack?
Yeah, I'm going to pick Alabama's defense just because, the day that someone can truly just line up and run right at Alabama and impose their will that way is going to be a first for me. The way you beat Alabama, the quarterbacks that have beaten Alabama in recent years have been, Deshaun Watson, Bo Wallace, Johnny Manziel, Nick Marshall, guys that spread the ball around and keep Alabama, keep the defense on the field, wear them down, things like that. And that's not what Georgia's strength is. So, it'll be interesting to see if Georgia can come right at Alabama, or what sort of wrinkles Jim Chaney can come up with. Obviously Kirby Smart's the guy that knows that scheme and would know, the weaknesses of it. So, but until proven, I know Alabama's thin at linebacker right now, but until proven otherwise, I don't think anybody can run right out at Alabama and win that way.
when you look at Alabama's offense, Jalen Hurts as a sophomore to me has improved so much just as a passer in 1 year. But what about his game is going to be the biggest key for the Tide if they're going to come away with a victory?
I kind of question how much he has improved as a passer. I threw for like 120 yards against Clemson, and before the Clemson game, I was looking into how he'd done passing on third down, and on third and long situations, he's only thrown something like 8 passes all season. So he's that situation obviously that Alabama tries to stay out of. But I would have thought given the way that he struggled last year, that Alabama would make a concerted effort to get him reps in those situations, and to prepare for games like this. But they've largely stayed out of those situations. And the big question is how will he fare if he's forced into a third and long situation. We saw how Georgia's pass rush completely flummoxed Oklahoma in the second half on Monday night. And I think if Georgia can do that to Oklahoma, I think they can do it to Alabama.
And then, of course, one of the fun storylines about this is Kirby Smart, the former assistant to Nick Saban. Saban 11-0 all-time against his former assistants, with each of those wins, I believe, coming by at least 14 points. What is it that Kirby Smart can do to outsmart maybe the Jedi Master that is Nick Saban?
I think the key will be to don't try and outsmart yourself. Don't try and be something you're not. The history is what it is, but he's never played a team as good as this Georgia team. He's never played Kirby Smart before. I think Georgia, at this point, you got to dance to who brung you, as Gerald Will said. You got to be who you are and hope that it's good enough if you execute to beat Alabama. And if it's not, then you reload and try again. But changing it up too much at this point, I think, would be counterproductive.
All right, Zach, I'm going to ask you straight up on Monday night in Atlanta: is it Alabama Roll Tide or is it Go Dogs?
I think Alabama's going to win. Jalen Hurts, is very Fromm-like in the way that his stat sheet isn't going to light your eyes on fire. But the guy's just a winner. He knows how to knows what plays to make when it gets to be winning time. And then he has obviously the added element that Fromm doesn't have, is being able to make plays with his feet, extend plays the way Fromm can't. And I think that will prove to be key. And I think it will be a close, low-scoring game. I think Alabama wins.
Zach Barnett, college football writer, Football Scoop, and college football talk here on Press Row. Zach, thanks a lot for the time. Enjoy the game on Monday night.
Thank you. Anytime.
All right, Zach Barnett there. And listen, I want to pick Alabama so bad. Nick Saban, chance for his 5th championship with Alabama in the last 9 years, would be his 6th national championship overall. He's just so talented as a coach. He's a tremendous game planner. That defense is unbelievable, but there's something about Nick Chubb and Sam Michel in the backfield and what Jake Fromm has done this year. I don't usually pick offense over defense. I almost never do it. But the running game that Alabama's going to have to face, that attack is so talented. Nick Chubb is one of the best running backs in the country. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I give the slight edge to Bama, but I think Georgia may have the chance to win this game and come away with their first national championship in a few decades. We mentioned UCF earlier, and listen, they have every right in the world, in my mind, to claim the national championship. They're the only team that went undefeated. They beat Auburn, an SEC school that beat both Alabama and Georgia, who are playing for the national title. I think they legitimize the need for an expansion of the playoff. Whether it goes to 8 or 6 or 12 or 30, whatever the number is, UCF this season proved that there needs to be expansion. Whether they actually have a shot or not can be determined on the field. It should not be determined by 13 people in a boardroom. It's not fair to the players. It's not fair to fans. It's not fair to coaches. Listen, I love the fact that they won. You can't tell me, no matter how much Alabama beat Clemson by, no matter how much they could beat Georgia by, you can't tell me UCF at least did not deserve a chance to prove themselves. They earned that chance with their win over Auburn, and I'm going to fight for expansion. There should be an automatic qualifier for each conference, and I don't like this idea of the group of 5 and then the Power 5 playoff. No, put them all in, let them play it out. I don't like the bowl games because I think most of them are meaningless and stupid, and 6 wins, a 500 season, should not be rewarded with a trip to a bowl game. That should be reserved for teams that are actually going to try and win a national championship. I'm going to fight that until my dying breath. So we got the championship game coming up on Monday night. On Saturday, we have NFL playoffs beginning, wild card weekend in the NFL. Eric Galko is going to join us when we come back, preview some of the biggest stories in the NFL, including coaching vacancies, maybe a little bit of an early draft preview as well, coming up on Press Row.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
The March to Minneapolis is on. Welcome back on Press Row. Wild card weekend in the NFL playoffs coming up here this weekend. You've got Titans, Chiefs, obviously, the Bills and the Jaguars, Rams and the Falcons, Panthers and the Saints all coming up here this weekend. Eric Galko is with the Sporting News as well as Optimum Scouting. He joins us now here to help preview the NFL playoffs. But Eric, before we get to that, I want to touch on NFL coaching vacancies. A few of them have popped up. One that we thought was there and now apparently isn't. Cincinnati, Marvin Lewis, a 2-year deal now through 2019. How did Marvin Lewis go from leaving the Bengals to now becoming the head coach once again of the Cincinnati Bengals?
Yeah, it's incredible, right? He was let go, and the players played that way for their last regular season game, and then now he's back for 2 more years. And I guess kudos to Marvin Lewis for getting his players motivated to get the 7th win, and then, coming back for his 2 more years. But I think the real thing for the Cincinnati Bengals is not that Marvin Lewis is a good or bad coach. It's the ownership. Mike Brown is in charge of the football operation for the Cincinnati Bengals, and he's not a fan of change. He likes the Bengals and how they're laid out, coaching staff, front office-wise, decision-making-wise, and for better or for worse, that's the way he wants to keep things. And I think when Marvin Lewis might move on, I think Mike Brown, and what I've been told, is he started kind of talking to coaches and talking to potential people who could replace him, and a lot of people want to go in there and change what the Bengals are doing. And the Bengals feel that their process right now is successful. They're a team that's been, 7+ wins, I believe 11 out of the 15 years Marvin Lewis has been a coach. They've been to playoffs 7 times, and they feel it's a process that's comparable to all the top programs around the NFL. So I think when you factor all that in, it made more sense for the Bengals to now know Marvin Lewis will be done in 2019 and start grooming a replacement who can appreciate what the Bengals have already done.
One vacancy that feels like it's already been filled is obviously in Oakland, although it's not official that John Gruden is going to become the head coach of the Raiders. But how soon should we expect to hear John Gruden head coach of the Raiders?
Yeah, very soon. And it's no secret that ESPN had let a lot of their NFL analysts, top analysts, know that, hey, we may not be renewing Monday Night Football. We may lose NFL live rights in the future. They're not expecting to, but they may. And that's why we see Herm Edwards surprisingly getting an Arizona State job and why John Gruden was legitimately linked this time to Tennessee football jobs. And I think once that Tennessee, which was a real opportunity, once that went away, something fell up, right? And I think that's what happened. The Oakland Raiders said, you know what, John, if Jack Kirby doesn't work out this year, we'd love to have you as your head coach. So this has been kind of a long on conclusion. I think John Gruden knows that he's got a lot of leverage in the situation. So you can imagine he's going to hold out as long as possible. And when I say possible, I don't mean weeks and weeks. Likely very soon, because he wants to get his coaching staff together, and those coaches and their families have to know what's going to happen next. Because if not Oakland, where else can they go? But that should happen by, I would say, sometime before the early of next week. Obviously, his contract's going to be one of the highest of any NFL head coach, deservingly or not. And his staff will be made up of a lot of coaches coaching around the NFL because he hasn't coached in the league in over 10 years now. So still a lot of moving parts. That's really the holdup. But I think the main thing is Johnson has leverage here, and he knows it.
I'm going to ask a question here that may seem naive, but he leaves the Raiders and then beats them. The team that he created beats them with Tony Dungy's team in Tampa Bay. Outside of those couple of talented seasons, 95 and 81 as a head coach, not including the playoffs, obviously. But how did John Gruden, after 9 years away from coaching, create this aura about him being so tremendous that he's constantly and consistently linked to so many big-time jobs?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the rise in access on television and really the appreciation by people around the NFL in decision-making roles, presidents, owners, in valuing what these people are saying on TV. And we've seen Louis Riddick, who was fired from the Philadelphia Eagles, I believe, as the director of player personnel. He he's interviewing for NFL GM jobs. So he got fired, he rose to TV, and now might get a higher promotion after a few years of sitting out. We see that Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network. He's getting opportunities. John Lynch going from the booth to being the general manager of the 49ers. I think a lot of it is these owners and these team presidents are watching these people talk on TV, hearing what they're saying, appreciating their football acumen and football IQ about handling the roster, handling the coaching staff, and they can kind of figure out the rest. I think for John Gruden, along with that aura of him being this phenom as a young coach who was raised the Raiders and traded the Bucks, and that whole prestige in the early 2000s, coupled with the fact that he's been a highly respected analyst and Monday Night Football color commentator, and his work with quarterbacks and his kind of consistent ties to the coaching industry. He's always kind of helping coaches or helping players, and he hasn't been totally out of it. He's trying one foot in the door for a lot of his opportunities. That's why I think this makes a lot of sense. And it was going to happen at some point. He's in the age where he'd be among the older coaches in the NFL. Now he's still in the middle of the pack, and he has a chance to take over an Oakland team that could be a Super Bowl contender in 2018 if his belief in Derek Carr holds true.
He's Eric Galko of the Sporting News and Optimum Scouting, joining us here on Press Row. Of the remaining NFL coaching vacancies that are out there, which one do you see is the most appealing?
Yeah, I've seen people mention the Lions and other jobs like that. To me, there's two clear top coaching jobs, and that's the New York Giants and the Chicago Bears. The New York Giants, solely for the reason that the Mara family is one of the most influential and loyal ownerships in the NFL. We've seen the Mara family approve of Ben McAdoo benching Eli Manning, all for the sake of showing that they believe in their head coach and are loyal. To do that shows to every NFL head coaching candidate that, hey, it's hands off. We're never going to bother you in season, in the off season. You're going to get multiple years to prove what you have. If you win, it's still coming for us. We'll repay you financially as well as give you every opportunity to be a respected head coach. That's why that job is so coveted. I think the Giants are going to let this all play out and let John Gruden sign and let a couple other teams interview coaches, but they know they're a big game hunting, and don't be surprised at all if top college head coaches, top NFL current head coaches recently fired or top offensive coordinators are kind of waiting for the Giants to make them move executive a job. And then the Bears, simply put, Mitch Trubisky has flashed enough as a franchise quarterback that whoever inherits that team can look at it like the Rams of a year ago when Sean McVay took over for Jared Goff and made that offense successful. So the Bears aren't far away, and I think some skill position help as well as some back-end defensive secondary help can make a huge difference in 1 year in Chicago.
Before we get to the actual games coming up this weekend, Pro Football releasing its Hall of Fame finalists here earlier this week. A number of great guys that you can debate to getting in, but my bigger question more is, how come Terrell Owens isn't already in the Hall of Fame, and will he be going in this year alongside Randy Moss?
Absolutely. Physically, he's one of the most productive receivers in NFL history. He's caught Super Bowl winning touchdown passes from Steve Young. He's been a Super Bowl leading player for the Philadelphia Eagles that year, so he's won at a high level. He's produced. And I think the metric a lot of Hall of Fame voters I know and I would use as well is how long was that person or that receiver or quarterback or whatever one of the top 3 or 4 at their position. And for Terrell Owens, it felt like more than half his career he was consistently considered one of the top 3 or 4 receivers in football, even in the late 90s when he still went against top receivers there, or it's the mid-2000s, 2010 when he's with the Philadelphia Eagles and being productive there. I think that longevity of his top end support is really impressive. So no doubt in my mind he should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But certainly these voters are humans, and they remember kind of the antics he played off the field, and whether or not that influenced his role as a team and a locker room presence, I've been told it hasn't. He's very respected by teammates he used to have, and whether that has an impact on how he treated the media back then, which wasn't great during his prime, if that's playing a role, that's unfortunate. But certainly it'd be hard-pressed to find an argument that he shouldn't be a first-ballot Hall of Famer, in my opinion. And most of the voters that I know that are casting their vote are going to put him in the Hall of Fame.
Eric Galko, Optimum Scouting and the Sporting News, joining us here on Press Row. Let's look ahead now to Wild Card Weekend coming up here. A lot of surprising teams, the Vikings, the Saints, Jaguars, Bills, Rams, even teams that we didn't expect to be in there. But how do you ultimately see this weekend kind of shaping out?
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see if the Chiefs or Titans can kind of make good and a lot of talent they have in the AFC. They're two really talented teams that have kind of been held back a little bit by whether it's injuries or offensive inefficiency. But those two teams, I think, quietly could surprise and win 2 games in the playoffs. I know people don't say that too often with those two teams, but they're loaded on offense with talent. Both teams have very active pass rushes and ball-hawking secondaries that I think both those teams, I'll be watching to see if one of those teams explodes the way I think. But I think all eyes should be on the NFC. And the AFC seems like it's going to be Patriots and Steelers, with the Jaguars maybe playing spoiler against Pittsburgh down the road, but more importantly, NFC wide open. And with Jared Goff, a first-year starter, Case Keenum, a backup to start the season, Nick Foles, a backup when Carson Wentz gets hurt, you've got Drew Brees there in New Orleans who wants to show that he's the best quarterback left in the playoffs. I think it's very fair to say that in the NFC, and an offense that's been dynamic without his help with a great running game. So I'm curious to see how Drew Brees and the Saints can kind of take over and maybe be the best team in the NFC after Wild Card Weekend, just by how they play.
I don't want to put you on the spot here in terms of picking a Super Bowl at the start of the playoffs, but, who do you see going to Minneapolis? Do the Vikings have a chance to be the first team ever to play the Super Bowl in their home stadium?
Certainly do, and people have been counting out Case Keenum since he's been starting, but he's proved them wrong. He's reminded a lot, I think, of kind of tail end of his career, Brett Favre. Not the same arm talent, but really creating things and utilizing a great defense when Favre had in Minnesota to make plays in the short area and let his receivers run after the catch, take chances occasionally, and kind of set up the running game really well. And Case Keenum's done great to kind of call audibles and adjusting for the Minnesota Vikings offense. We've done a lot more than people realize, but I still think the Patriots could be the obvious favorite to get to the Super Bowl from the AFC, especially if Antonio Brown can't play next week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the NFC is pretty wide open. Again, I mentioned Drew Brees and the Saints earlier. I'll take the experience Super Bowl winning quarterback in the NFC over the rest of the field. So I'll say Patriots Saints right now, but the Vikings certainly have a great shot to do it, even with Case Keenum at quarterback.
Eric Galko of the Sporting News and Optimum Scouting here joining us. And last thing I want to touch on, it's never too early to talk NFL draft, but one of the biggest stories going into it will obviously be how talented this quarterback class is. How would you evaluate the quarterbacks we know of that are going to be drafted in a couple of months and comparing this draft class to other draft classes?
Yeah, I think certainly Sam Darnold is the one that's a question mark right now. I've been told since October that Sam Darnold is expecting and very likely to stay at school at USC. You take him out of the equation, you get a very unique quarterback class. You get Josh Rosen, who is one of the more NFL-ready quarterbacks we've seen, and probably Andrew Luck in terms of talent and mechanics and development, but he's got his own off-field question marks that remind some scouts of Robert Griffin and some things that made him struggle in the NFL. You've got Baker Mayfield, a Russell Wilson hopeful-type quarterback, but he's 6 feet, maybe a little bit less. How high is a guy like that going in the draft process? You've got Lamar Jackson, certainly a lightning rod for discussion on social media as well as in the NFL about whether this guy is either a top quarterback or he's a receiver at the next level. And then Josh Allen of Wyoming, the darling of the media since the preseason compared to Cam Newton before the year started, but he's been under 50% completion percentage. He has not been great the last 2 years at Wyoming. How high does a guy like that go when he compares so much to guys like Christian Hackenberg who are certainly in the NFL? So it's a very talented and high upside quarterback class. And last year's I thought was almost underappreciated. Pat Mahomes, Trubisky, Deshaun Watson, all really talented guys. But this year's quarterback class has 4, 5, maybe 6 guys that at their best can be franchise quarterbacks and top 7 or 8 quarterbacks in the NFL for a long time. But each of them has a lot more warts than we've seen in recent years. And there's no Jared Goff or Carson Wentz or Andrew Luck or Cam Newton in this draft class. That's going to be a clear-cut first overall pick. Josh Rosen has a chance. Baker Mayfield's well-liked, but a lot of question marks left to answer between now and the NFL Combine and the NFL Draft.
How much does Saquon Barkley declaring for the NFL Draft kind of throw a wrench into the plans of teams up there in the top 10?
Yeah, we've seen 2 straight years with running backs go 4th overall. Ezekiel Elliott 2 years ago and Leonard Fournette last year both end up being great draft picks for their respective teams. Todd Gurley 3 years ago being a top 10 pick. Saquon Barkley right in their wheelhouse, and he is as talented as those guys are. I think what makes Saquon Barkley unique compared to them is his pass catching ability. He's a really refined receiver out of the backfield, and he can do that right away in the NFL as well as being a developed pass blocker. You can see that in the Iowa game he played this year, especially on that last drive where he made 3 or 4 key pass blocking blocks that I know NFL teams have recognized. But he's also a high character guy. He's a culture changing guy for that locker room, more so than Todd Gurley, Ezekiel Elliott, and Leonard Fournette were as prospects coming in. So you're getting an NFL-ready, maturity guy, third down back, everything you want to do for him. I think he's a much better version of Kareem Hunt, very similar athletically to Ezekiel Elliott. I think he'll be a top 4 or 5 pick in this draft class. And the Browns at 1 and at 4 could be interested. The Colts at 3, along with a lot more teams in the top 5 or 6 picks, make a lot of sense for Saquon Barkley.
Eric Galko, Optimum Scouting and the Sporting News, joining us here on Press Row. Eric, we appreciate the time. We'll speak to you a little bit further down the road.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
All right, that's Eric Galko, and you know we'll touch on actual predictions for the NFL playoffs coming up this week, and we'll touch on the Hall of Fame guys. But These coaching vacancies are so strange to me. John Gruden, I don't understand the aura behind it. I get it. Listen, he's tremendous as a commentator, and yes, I think that's what, as he mentioned, helped John Lynch get the GM job, has helped other people who have been fired go to TV and then get better jobs because of their acumen on TV and what they've said, and people are watching, and they're thinking, you know what, maybe this guy would be good. But you know what? It's what amazes me is to like Jim Caldwell or Jim Schwartz possibly getting other head coaching jobs. Steve Spagnuolo, Josh McDaniels, all these guys who have been head coaches before and, for lack of a better term, failed. You need a little bit of fresh blood now and then. Guys who haven't been it. Now, granted, the Rams struck a gold mine with Sean McVay this year. And guys like Vance Joseph, we got to wait and see if he pans out. But I wonder so much why they were so quick to get rid of Jack Del Rio. Is it because Gruden created this aura? Is it because he works with these quarterback camps every single year? Is it because of what he did for that organization, helping them create a team that went to a Super Bowl? Granted, he ended up beating that team in the Super Bowl. But, I mean, it's so strange to me that we're so reluctant to go back and so quick to go back to what we want and what we knew before, whether it was good or bad or indifferent. So the coaching phase, I don't know if I necessarily agree with Eric that the Giants are such a great spot. Detroit is interesting because I love Matthew Stafford. The Giants, depending on who they draft, if you can talk with Dave Gettleman, you can talk with John Mara about what their plan is going forward, who they're going to draft, and if that's something that's interesting to you, do you want to draft a rookie quarterback and have to deal with the locker room back and forth between Eli? Is Eli going to stay? Are you going to be trading Eli? Are you going to draft an offensive line to actually help Eli? Are you going to draft a running back? Are you going to be trading that pick? I mean, it's interesting. Arizona's the same way. Now that you don't have Carson Palmer after he retires, Drew Stanton, is he going to be the guy? I mean, are they going to trade up to try to get a quarterback? Could they draft Baker Mayfield there in the mid-first round? There's a lot of interesting vacancies there. So I'll be intrigued to see who gets hired where and all of that. But I'm still really surprised at the Raiders in so quick to get rid of Jack Del Rio and bring back John Gruden, and the Bengals for bringing back Marvin Lewis. This is a guy who, as Eric mentioned, they've had 7 wins in 11 of his 15 years. That's great. That's sub 500. They have made to the playoffs 7 of the 15 years, and they've lost every single time. They have not won. He still has not won a playoff game as a head coach. I understand you may not like change, but at some point you need to make it happen. I know he's been very talented, and he's made the Bengals at least competitive in that AFC North. But at some point, competitive isn't enough. You've got to actually win to be able to do that, and winning in the postseason. I don't know how Bengals fans feel about it, but it's so strange to think that this guy is going to be back with the Bengals for another 2 years of mediocrity. I'm sorry to say it, but that's what it is. You never think of the Bengals as a legitimate contender in the North because Marvin Lewis has never won a playoff game. I don't know Marvin Lewis. I'm sure, and we've talked with Mike Jones of USA Today and multiple other people who have said that he's such a great guy and he is a great coach. But you know what? He hasn't won. He hasn't won, and that's the biggest key when it comes down to it in the NFL. When we come back, we'll touch on the Hall of Fame for the NFL. We'll touch on the playoffs as well. And one group of people that might be complaining just because they're starting to second think, and it might be fake complaining more than anything else. It's all next on Press Row.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast Public House Media, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Final segment on the first show of 2018 here on Press Row. I'm Christian Heimel. Thanks so much for joining us here once again and continuing your support of the show into the new calendar year. Time to answer some of your listener questions, and we always appreciate you guys engaging with us, not just when we ask for questions, but at any point, throughout the week, throughout the entirety of the show. If you have any things you want to talk about, I'm happy to interact with you guys. So you can find me on Twitter at Chris Heimel. You can find the show at Press Row PHM. That's both Twitter and Instagram. You can also find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast - Public House Media. Email the show as well, pressrowphm@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for making us one of the fastest growing sports podcasts in the country. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher.com, Spreaker.com, or on the website, thephmedia.com. We always appreciate your guys' support. Subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends and family. And, again, we thank you so much for the continuing support throughout this growth process as we continue to bring you some of the hardest hitting and in-depth analysis. And our thanks to Zach Barnett. Big thanks to Eric Galko of the Sporting News and, of course, College Football Talk joining us here today. All right, let's get to some of your questions here. We've got coming in from all throughout social media and, of course, emails. Question on Instagram: will the Bills make a run in the NFL playoffs? Listen, I don't know. I mean, we talked about it a little bit with Eric. That Jacksonville defense is so good, and Blake Bortles somehow is playing well enough to not lose games, which is a great thing. You want that as a quarterback, obviously, when you're trying to win and trying to make the playoffs. But that defense is so good. Leonard Fournette is tremendous. I don't know how the Jags have done this. And it doesn't help that LaShawn McCoy may not be available with that ankle injury. But it's really interesting to see with the game. I don't know, honestly. I really don't. I mean, with the game being in Jacksonville, it kind of helps both teams, obviously. Better weather than what they're expecting in Buffalo this weekend. But I tell you, I think it's Jacksonville. They're a 9-point favorite. I think it's the Jags' game to win there. If I had to go through and pick the first round wildcard weekend, I'd probably go. I'll go Kansas City, Los Angeles, Jacksonville, and New Orleans. I mean, I'll take the home teams. I'll go chalk for the home teams this weekend, just because it's a huge factor. And I think those 4 teams, more than anything else, have a great running game, which is key when it comes to this point of the year, because you've been playing for so long that you've got those little nicks and bruises can turn into injuries more than anything else when it comes through. So New Orleans running game, Jacksonville's running game, Todd Gurley in Los Angeles, Kareem Hunt in Kansas City. They've all got better running games than their counterparts, in my opinion. So it'll be interesting to see. But I don't think the Bills make a run. I think it's been a long time since they've been in the playoffs. I think it was 19 years, something like that, since the Miracle, the Music City Miracle, when they lost to Tennessee. But it's going to be a short-lived return to the postseason for Buffalo, and then we'll see what happens with Tyrod Taylor and the rest of that Bills organization. So it'll be a little interesting to watch. Joseph sending us here on an email: who would you select into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and how come you didn't see anybody else? The 15 finals, who of them would you like to see get in quickest? Joseph, let's see here. I mean, listen, you got 5 guys who are going to get yes or no, and then you've got a couple. You can only get 10, if I remember correctly, to go in. And then we'll see exactly who gets in. But it's down to 15 finalists now, and you've got some great, great names on here. It's unbelievable. Ray Lewis, Brian Urlacher, Alan Faneca, Kevin Mawai. Let's see, who else is there? Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Edrin James, Ty Law, John Lynch, Tony Baselli, Isaac Bruce, Brian Dawkins. I mean, those are some great, great names. The ones that I think, and I said this a while back, I even thought a guy like Marvin Harrison should be there. The wide receiving class this year was incredible. But from a first ballot standpoint, I mean, I'm looking at him, and let's see here. First year, Walls, Joe Jacoby is in his final year of eligibility. Walls is in his final year of eligibility, but it's insane to think of all these guys. And I'll be honest, the ones that I think go in this year out of those 15, From the modern era, let's see here. Terrell Owens and Randy Moss have to be in. They transcended the game, and I've said this. Whether you like them off the field or not, the Hall of Fame is not about what you did off the field. It's about your numbers on the field. How did you produce during your career? To suggest that your off-the-field position should reflect that is ridiculous, unless what you did off the field directly affected how you performed. And I'm talking about PEDs. I'm talking about gambling, those type things. But if you were just, people didn't like you, you weren't gracious to the media, boo-hoo, so what? But I got to tell you, Terrell Owens and Randy Moss transcended the game. They deserve to be in. They should be in. Brian Dawkins is another one who was so talented for Philadelphia, but just because you didn't like him that much or he didn't really talk to many of the media members, so what? I mean, that's why John Lynch is probably going to get ahead of him, is because he was that guy that you saw all the time on TV. He was a great analyst. But Edgerrin James you probably won't see get in. I don't think he gets in this time. Alan Faneca, I would love to see him get in. Kevin Mawai as well. But here's, if you got to go, because let's see, here's what's going to happen. The ones who are going to get inducted are going to be inducted, announced during Super Bowl week. So just a couple of weeks, we're going to find out. And let's see, class is going to be chosen February 3rd, day before the Super Bowl, and they're going to trim it down to 10 and then to 5, and 5 finalists, and 5 finalists chosen yes or no, and those who receive an 80% approval will get in. So here's what I think. You're going to get Terrell Owens and Randy Moss. You should. Brian Dawkins, Kevin Mawai, Alan Faneca. I'm only going to limit it at 5 right there, just because I think those are the 5 best cases. After that, I could see John Lynch getting in. I can see Tony Baselli getting in. I can't really see Ty Law right now, unfortunately. I do think he eventually gets in. Same with Isaac Bruce. Same with Joe Jacoby, Edgerrin James. But the 5 that I would 100% have in, Terrell Owens, Randy Moss, Brian Dawkins, Tony Baselli, Alan Faneca, and Kevin Mawai. Those are the 5 that, in my opinion, need to be in. So it's be interesting to see. Can't wait and find out. But those would be my picks, and we'll find out, obviously, in a couple of weeks who actually ends up in heading into Canton. Last thing I want to talk with you guys a little bit about here as we start to close up shop is we got the Olympics coming up, and obviously one of the biggest stories that is going to be talked about when the Olympics actually get there is the fact that the United States hockey team, and that any hockey team that's in the Olympics, will not have NHL players, as they were prohibited after some negotiations and being unable to get some concessions from the Players Association. The NHL, a little bit of a financial dispute with the IOC. They didn't think that Pyeongchang, South Korea, is a great hockey market, and having some down numbers. Plus, you don't want to stop the season for a couple of weeks and potentially lose some of your stars to injury. There was an interesting article on ESPN earlier this week about U.S. hockey players are still processing the snub. Greg Wyshynski wrote it, and it was pretty interesting. Kevin Shattenkirk, New York Rangers defenseman who played for the U.S. in 2014, he was quoted prior to the Winter Classic on Monday at Citi Field against the Sabres. I wish we were going. It still kills me that we're not. You had young players, guys who were going to be able to represent their country for the first time. Jack Eichel, Rookie of the Year, Austin Matthews, unable to do it. Eichel saying, every kid dreams about trying to play in the Olympics. I'm the same way. Obviously, when we found out we're not going to be able to play in the Olympics, it's tough. Not just for me, but for a lot of guys that had opportunities that are getting to the end of their careers. It only happens every 4 years. I think it's something that players really wanted to do, but we couldn't find a way to make it work. Listen, I love seeing those names that you actually know on the Olympic roster. Being able to root for your country as opposed to your team. It's a lot of fun as you know, an American. You're rooting for a guy like Jack Eichel if you're not a Sabres fan, or you're rooting for if you're not a fan of Sidney Crosby but you're Canadian, you're rooting for him all of a sudden. Watching Caps fans have to root against Alex Ovechkin. It's kind of funny to see all that. But at the same time, if the players really wanted to get it done, they would have worked with the NHL to get it done. But it's going to be fun to see. First time since 1998, you're going to have amateurs, you're going to have college players, you're going to have Americans who are playing overseas as part of the U.S., but anybody with an NHL contract is not allowed to play. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with a team, like Canada, who can't send a lot of their best players, including Crosby. And we'll see exactly what happens there. But it's unfortunate. It'll be different to see it. We'll talk more as we get closer to the Olympics, but I can't help but feel that if these players really wanted to play in the Olympics and really wanted to represent their country, they would have made it work with the NHL. They would have found a way. I think it's kind of sour grapes as we get a little bit closer. It's kind of remorse of, I kind of wish we were going, but I don't think anybody's going to really be upset about it. The NHL is going to have better ratings than the Olympics will. It'll be tough for hockey as a sport in the Olympics without these NHL players, without the fanfare. But the NHL may be right. Pyongyang in South Korea may not be the best market. You may not get a great ticket sale there, but I think a lot of people, if they really want it to will happen, will have gone. They'll go anyway, whatever it is, but we'll see what happens in 2022 in Beijing again. So who knows? It'll probably be similar to Pyongyang without the Olympics, but who knows? We'll find out what happens as we move closer. But again, listen, as much as I want the NHL players to be there, I think it's kind of sour grapes that some of these guys are a little upset that they're not going at this point, simply because as they're getting closer, they're starting to have a little bit of remorse that they're not going. If they really wanted to, they would have figured out a way to get it done. So that's my 2 cents on that. Whether you agree with me or not, I'd love to hear your opinions. Find us on social media at PressRowPHM on Twitter and Instagram, Press Row Podcast Public House Media on Facebook, or you can email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. Want to thank Zach Barnett of College Football Talk for joining us here on the program this week. Big thanks to Eric Galko of the Sporting News, and of course, as well as Optimum Scouting, for joining us here and talking a little bit of NFL there. So thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys for being a part of the show, supporting the show. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends and family. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher.com, Spreaker.com, and as always, the website, thephmedia.com. Into the new year and on to a lot bigger and better things here coming up on Press Row. And as always, we appreciate you guys being a big part of it. So until next week, I'm Christian Heimel. I'll see you on Press Row.